All right, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Ben, for that introduction. Thor, the museum, this has been a fantastic experience. This museum has really trusted my vision and just kind of let me come in with this year and a half worth of work. So can't wait to talk about it. So for the last year, I've really been using my studio practice to explore the psychological, social, cultural landscapes of contemporary America through image making. I'm really interested in how identities and expectations surrounding gender and expectations and class and selfhood are shaped and understood by all of us collectively as a culture. And I think that was worth really exploring through paint. But before that, I think my primary interest has always just simply been painting the figure and exploring the figures that I'm painting, their motivations, their successes, their anxieties, their failures. I'm really into human psychology. I'm always trying to surprise myself, searching for something I don't quite know already. I think what interests me most is finding the awkward and ugly things that maybe shouldn't work but feel right for whatever reason. I guess I'm looking for that thing that's both familiar and unfamiliar. Amy Stillman is a painter. She's an abstract painter, but she's also a writer. And she wrote a article called Shit Happens, Notes on Awkwardness for Frieze magazine in 1996, I believe. Or maybe, no, actually it was 2016. It was about 10 years ago. And since I read that, it has really informed the way I think about finding awkwardness through paint. She describes just even having a body as comedy, and the folds and the saggy recesses of this thing you drive around with your head being what abstraction is, and that is what she looks for. So I started kind of thinking about imagery from that lens. I do use crude aesthetics and humor as a Trojan horse, if you will. I think it amplifies the psychology of an otherwise run-of-the-mill portrait, and it makes a challenging subject matter more palatable at first glance. I'm continually captivated by paint. So I guess the core of my practice is really just pushing the paint around. I use oil paint, I use lots of medium, thickly. I'm really trying to push it around the canvas. And that ongoing balancing act of the composition finding is really what drives me. My process is deeply tied to the way I'm feeling in the moment. I'm realizing I'm constantly changing from minute to minute, day to day, hour to hour, and I find that sometimes if I spend too long on a painting, if I start a painting and I'm working on it, for weeks, it really loses the energy and the idea that I first started with. So I've really kind of adopted this alla prima, working wet into wet method, and I've started more or less kind of speed dating my canvases. I like to not work on the weekends and then start Monday and just kind of turn out as many beginnings as I can, and then by the end of the week I might have 2 or 3 done, and the rest just get ripped off, restretched, and it's just part of the assembly line. So because what feels certain one day can completely collapse and unravel the next, I really like the paintings to reflect that and act as records of these shifting emotions and capturing what's ever on my mind and happening in my life at that particular time. So with this series, politics definitely kind of crept in. I wouldn't say for the first time, but it was I think the first time I've really been conscious of kind of tending to a whole group of works together that speak the same language. Okay. I work really quickly and intuitively. I do use references loosely, but the most important shift in my practice has been, in the last year, the near total abandonment of preparatory work or planning. I jump in without preconceptions, and I try to let the work emerge organically, kind of riffing on these images as needed, maybe taking an arm from that guy and a leg from this guy, and then hopefully at a certain point the painting takes over and I get out of its way. It's rare, but I think when the work looks back at you like it has a will of its own, like that just feels like magic to me. Or maybe it's just luck, I don't know. I'd like to think of my studio as a garden that I just tend to and creates paintings. So my process is very much if I may have 10 paintings going, I will try to spend a little time with that baby every day until it's not working out, and then it's just gone. Okay, so these are some studio shots taken just with my iPhone. This is the spring of 2024 when this body of work was just starting. So these are all quick, mostly one sitting oil paintings on canvas paper. And I think I did all of these over the course of maybe 2 weeks. 2-week period. Here's some more. So this is when I started thinking about the post-war ideal of the American suburbs as like a seductive paradise. I was reading a lot of translations of Greek mythology at the time, and I started thinking about the lotus eaters, the myth of the lotus eaters, which occupies about 20 pages in the Odyssey. Odysseus's men go to this island and they meet this race of people who have these lotus flowers. They eat them and they forget about anything else but eating these lotus flowers. And I am someone I lived in New York City for 20 years, and I moved to Michigan for my husband's job and to raise my son here. And I would not trade that, but I will say that adapting to the suburban lifestyle from what I was used to was maybe, there are big traumas and there are little traumas. Maybe it was a little trauma for me, and I really wanted to kind of like conjure all my anxieties and my feelings into this body of work. I think I ended up branching out, zooming out more because it felt like a little bit one note once I had done all the paintings, but this is really kind of the incubator. So moving to the suburbs, I had to learn to drive. I was really shocked at the lack of diversity, the lack of arts. It took me a little while to kind of find my thing. So this is kind of, as you can see, kind of a Stepford wife, maybe, aesthetic that I was kind of doing at first. Yeah. I was really balancing contradiction. Like I wanted the surfaces to feel inviting and even beautiful, but also off, and like really focus on the tension between the polish of the mid-century advertising that I was looking at and like the creeping sense that something is off. But then this is also when the happy housewife made her appearance. And so this was 2024, the spring of 2024, right before like the trad wife thing kind of blew up that summer. I didn't know what a trad wife was before then. And if you don't, on social media, there are these women that have kind of rejected feminist, they essentially are baking bread, raising their kids, and doing it really glamorously. It's definitely an aesthetic thing, and it's definitely a social media thing. But I started realizing that this trope is really powerful because it really conveniently glosses over the realities of inequality, especially for women and people of color. And so I started thinking about painting style like a filter that I could use to hide or call attention to ugly truths. Like never like get your lips done on Groupon. So teeth and lips are definitely a recurring abstract motif, I'm sure you've noticed. And it wasn't something that I did purposely at first, but I'm realizing that the mouth for me is a real fertile symbol. It's like the locus of speech, digestion, pleasure, growth, decay, and I find just the expression of the mouth to be kind of what the paintings are about in many cases. Okay. Lobsters. Okay, so I'm convinced that the real secret to making good art is learning to manage failure. I think there's a really strange liberation in total failure. I always say that if I'm a good painter, it's not because of technical skill. I think technical ability is fine, but what matters more is how to construct the picture, the things I choose to include or omit, because those decisions are not made by the hand. My background is, I went to undergraduate, I got my BFA in painting in the late 90s. I went to Pratt Institute in New York City, and at that time, painting was dead. And if there were any professors actually teaching how to paint, how to glaze, I didn't take them and I didn't know about them. Howard Buchwald was really running the show then. He's still around. I saw him recently. He's kind of decrepit, but he's still around. We had to work our size squared and abstract. It's like anything figurative, anything representational, that was considered academic, that was considered like really unserious. And that was the 90s. People were really into, so Swoon, she was in my year. I graduated with Swoon, so street art was just starting, like Chris Burton and conceptual art was really big, and then I think the painting department at Pratt at that time was really trying to turn out like the third generation of abstract expressionists, and I was there for it. I don't know. It was a long time ago. Anyway, so a huge influence on my kind of painting philosophy starts with, there's a really famous museum show from 1978. It was an exhibition called Bad Painting, curated by Marcia Tucker, who ran the New Museum. And this was a really landmark show that challenged prevailing ideas of what counted as good art. The artists featured included James Albertson, Joan Brown, Judith Linehaers, who just had a fantastic show at PPOW in the spring, and others working figuratively. Even William Wegman, who does the dogs, the photographs of the dogs. He used to be a painter, was in the show, and it really inspired like the bad painters of the 80s, like Julian Schnabel and Basquiat. Like it was a really kind of important show. But the concept was this. Like rather than incompetence or being de-skilled, these artists were working figuratively, but in ways that rejected polished mastery and dominant art world styles at the time. So instead of incompetence, bad painting was a willful embrace of awkwardness and kitsch and crudeness and like disregard for any kind of conventional representation. So in short, bad painting defined badness as a form of freedom, deliberately messy, tasteless, or grotesque, yet emotionally and conceptually sharp. It gave permission to treat painting less as mastery and more as play, critique, and rebellion. And I think there's just such a strange appeal to messy and gruesome and a thrill to this tastelessness. And today the idea of bad painting doesn't really make sense in the same way. I think so many paintings nowadays break with convention and taste in some way, but ugliness in a painting still holds sway. I think there's something actually comforting about an ugly painting, and it can speak more honestly about how we're feeling in the times we're living in. Here's another installation from the show. This is Neil Jenny's work. So I'm not happy about the way the world's working right now. I think with democracy and free speech and global stability at risk, we're all stressed and we're overloaded and addicted to our phones and juggling 3 thoughts at once. And I think that should be reflected in our art. And I want to see paintings that feel that way. Okay, so I was thinking a lot about art that activates other senses than just the eyes. Like Walter de Maria's Earth Room, the way when you walk in it, it smells and you can remember the way it smells. Or Merritt Oppenheim's Fur Teacup, just looking at it, you can imagine like hair in your mouth. And I think that that's like really interesting and gross, but it's a beautiful object. So I really wanted to make images that do something. And so I was trying to I was thinking about evoking feelings in the viewer, and I decided to explore discomfort. And I feel like what unsettles us is what lingers in our memory. I think we recall the moments we feel like afraid or hesitant long after they've passed. So I'm particularly drawn to images that evoke a visceral discomfort, something that triggers a bodily reaction before the mind has time to rationalize, and not necessarily talking about taboo violence and gore. I think that's too easy. I think some works feel visceral because of how they're made. Like Lucian Freud's, his thick impasto can make flesh seem almost too real, or Alice Neal, her portraits sometimes seem psychologically invasive, like her sitters seem vulnerable and you're like caught, you're not supposed to be looking at them. Kara Walker, for example, she does this beautiful Victorian silhouettes, but they're scenes of absolute abject horror. So I guess what I'm saying is what I'm interested, it's kind of back to the little trauma. I'm interested in the small, mundane ways that our bodies betray us. A pant leg soaked through by muddy water, or like really ordinary, ridiculous moments, but when isolated and amplified, become something else, and the viewer is like forced into an intimate encounter with these sensations. This painting specifically I made during a winter when I had really chapped lips and it was really difficult for me to eat, and I thought, well, somebody else is dealing with this too. I'm gonna make a painting for that person. So why discomfort? I started noticing a resistance to discomfort everywhere. I think people, even my son, seems to be really unable to tolerate boredom. People are unwilling to engage in conversations, quick to complain about minor inconveniences, and really resistant to hearing perspectives that maybe challenge their beliefs, regardless of like the speaker's expertise. So I thought, well, this is fascinating, because on one hand, I don't want a life that's smoothed over and polished to look perfect. Like I want friction and tension and the messiness of real experience, because that's where meeting is. But aging is really a bitter pill to swallow. Maria Lasting is an Austrian painter, and she devoted her life to exploring what she called body awareness painting, which was portraying not how the body looks, but how it feels to be inside one. She imposed strict limitations on her self-portraits, depicting only what she could physically feel. So she rarely painted hair because it was already dead. The resulting images are like fragmented and distorted, sometimes incomplete, or a really honest experience of a felt experience rather than just like representation. She never worked from photographs and relied solely on inner sensations, sometimes closing her eyes when she painted. And her self-portraits are almost never flattering. So my own paintings have long dealt with subjects that make me uncomfortable. During the pandemic, I painted crowds. I painted parties, concerts, raves, images of possible super spreading events at a time when we all longed for gathering. The idea of being shoulder to shoulder in a maskless crowd provoked instinctual discomfort. I really wanted these works to straddle a line between exhilaration and repulsion. On one side, there was a heightened alertness, as if something could go wrong at any moment, and on the other, they're like really optimistic. They're not passive. They're about joy and sex and death, I guess. They're all over compositions, really push towards abstraction while clinging to the narrative. So there's this idea that you want to make work that's broad and available to everyone, but I think it's almost impossible to do without leveraging your own experiences. So these explorations are really personal, and while they're not strictly self-portraits, the fear, anxiety, and shame they depict are my own. I think one of the things that really changed for me through my work is that I try to hone in on the bad feelings I have about myself or a situation and lean into that shame. Especially, I think shame and joy for me are closely related. Somehow, if I can make an image that creates joy just by completely giving over to those feelings of shame, and by confronting those feelings, whether about body image or aging or motherhood, I've really found moments of authenticity. I think by navigating discomfort, I've found a way to strip away pretense. I've had so many women come up to me and show me their wrinkles and commiserate with like paintings I've made, and had conversations about things with strangers I just never thought I would have because of this work. And if that's the purpose of the work, maybe that's it. Maybe not everything has to be that important, I guess I'm saying. So an obvious and significant influence on my work are obviously the aesthetics and iconography of mid-20th century America. I think this era's ideals, such as the picture-perfect suburban family, are rooted in nostalgia, but they really continue to shape our dynamics. I think this era is really romanticized as a time of prosperity and stability and traditional values, which I guess is an escape from the chaos of today. I don't know. I think now nostalgia really fascinates me because we long for what we don't have, either because we once had it or because we never did. It's like you're homesick for something imagined. And I think we're seeing echoes of this now in those trad wives, who idolize the past and reject feminism. I think it's another example of nostalgia for a simpler time. And escapism isn't new, but I think fantasies become dangerous when the stakes are high. Maybe we've given up. It feels like a total psychological resignation, like a backlash to workplace feminism. I think what women fought for in the 20th century was access to the workplace, but being both a mother and a worker was so unsustainable that after decades of progress, we're just still not paid equally, and the cost of child care remains prohibitive. But motherhood is such a complicated role. My son is the absolute love of my life, but I think the dominant experience of motherhood is guilt, anxiety, and tortured thoughts, in addition to love and joy. And I identify with this as a parent and an artist who feels the constant pull to be in my studio and the feeling of loss that accompanies both the decision to stay and go. Okay, Magritte. So we all know Magritte and his clouds and his bowler hats and his eye. But after World War II, he was invited to exhibit in Paris, and he was Belgian, and he never felt accepted by the other surrealists. So I suppose this dealer gave him a bone and invited him to a show in Paris, and he was kind of like offended by it, like it was just kind of like a small show. So over the course of maybe 5 weeks, he put together this show that completely lambasted the art world, French politics, and his other rivals. And the show was so hated that the works themselves ended up just getting distributed to his friends. And I don't think until like 2005, a curator in San Francisco actually tried to get some together. So this period of work, if you go to the library, you'll be lucky to find maybe 1 or 2 books that even mention this series of work. He called it the Vache works, which means cow, but it's also like a dirty joke or something too. I'm not French, so. So the famine. This is probably one of my favorite paintings I've ever seen. And if you notice, there's some similarities. This is Seasickness, which is a ham on a suit jacket in the sun. I don't even know what this is. And this is The Cripple. This is, I did this from memory for this piece, yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much all I have to say about this show here. This summer, I participated in a show called Icon in Burlington, Vermont, which I wanted to mention. They gave me the loose theme of icon that I could interpret however I wanted. And I started thinking about digital icons and celebrity icons. But then I started thinking about religious icons, and I kept coming back to the Madonna and Child because that is a trope I had been working with. But I was really thinking a lot about those Mannerist babies. And this painting by Parmigianino, Madonna with the Long Neck, is a painting I've always been obsessed with because I kind of consider it like the first modern painting. He totally, I mean, if you see the Madonna's proportions are so much larger than the others, and the baby is long and weird, and and I've always loved this painting. So this is kind of my take. I wanted to tap into that history, but bring it into a messier, more chaotic present, one that really represented the tangled experience of motherhood. I was thinking a lot about my child is 10 and wanting independence from me, and I'm proud of him, but I still, And this one got rejected from that show, but I still like it. This one, Baby's Breath, I was thinking a lot about how when you are nursing a child, you get sneezed on and breathed on, and you're touched out in a way that is absolutely unacceptable in any other situation. But with your child, it's wonderful. And this is my studio as of this morning, my messy studio. So what's now for me? So I just graduated from Cranbrook. I've just spent the past 2 years at Cranbrook, which was amazing. I got to spend 2 years on my practice, and that is just absolutely invaluable. And the fact that at this time in my life I made that happen still blows my mind. But yeah, I've been in production mode for 2 years, and this summer I've really had some time to reflect on the experience. And I think this is the moment to slow down, let myself play again. I'm still pulled towards suburban life, but I'm really wrestling now with the way images function. I think because we live in a time of endless scrolling where images are consumed instantly and forgotten just as fast, what does it mean to be an image maker? Especially now that AI is involved, that's a whole nother conversation. What makes an image matter? Like, how can painting with its slowness and materiality still command attention and hold space? Yeah, I've always described myself as an image maker, but I'm wondering if that's enough now, and I'm thinking I want them to come off the walls or something. So we'll see. Right now, I am in a cohort at Hammerspace Gallery in Grand Rapids, which is a brand new artist-run space with programming that supports parent artists, and I'm feeling really inspired right now. I think there's so many galleries that have closed recently, especially in New York City, like blue chip galleries, and with the economy kind of in the art world, I really think that these artist-run spaces are going to be popping up more, and I really think there can be some exciting things happening in a more grassroots level. So hopefully that happens. Thank you.